Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while. I think it's been well over 2 months since the last upload, and that's because I've started working on my very own game, and it's been a long time coming because I've been debating whether to start a game or not for the longest of periods of time. Because when I started programming, I always had the need to make a game in the back of my head, but then I never really got myself to do it because the commitment to making a game is just way too big, and the risk is also way too big, whether you will succeed or not. But better to take the risk and fail than wait forever and never do it, right? So maybe in 2 years I'll look back at it and say, hey, I made a game, at least I tried, right? So but hopefully it will succeed. So let's get right into it. Before we start, I want to make a disclaimer. This is not going to be one of your regular game devs or devlogs where you have a relatively short video somewhere between 8 to 20 minutes or 8 to 14-15 minutes like the devlogs I used to make, focusing on just a single game feature. I think those type of videos don't excite me anymore. Not the idea itself, but the way the video is being made. I think the direction YouTube is heading right now, and pretty much every mainstream media platform, the videos are getting very distilled in quality with quick cuts and scene changes in every 2 seconds and stuff like that, with a lot of movement and stuff like that, which is kind of really tiring my brain out. So I want to make something very long, just sit in front of the camera and talk about how the devlogs went, or how the development went, or how it is going, and maybe elaborate on certain features compared to just going in a chronological order of saying, hey, I started like this, I'm going like this, and I want to implement a feature like this. I'd rather say, hey, this is what I did today, and these are some things I found interesting during the development process, right? So keep that in mind, and let's get right into it, right? So first, let me open up my GitHub repo for my grid learning project. So this is the repo we are on. This is going to be private at the moment for obvious reasons, but I might try to make it public or open just to exclusively to Patreons, or even one-time subscribers probably, but I wanted to open this up because I want to show you when I started this whole project. It was like on April 29th, and today is 21st. So this is my last commit yesterday, and I was kind of refactoring a blueprint, I should say, but we'll get into that in a bit more detail later on. But the main thing I want to talk about for this game is it's not my original idea. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way before you guys go in the comments and say, hey, I've seen that game somewhere, and get on my ass for it, right? So this is a recreation of Yu-Gi-Oh's Dungeon Dice Masters. So if you've watched the series, I think near the episode of 25 to 30, they kind of switch the whole thing up and they play a new game called the Dice Masters. The game is pretty much like a strategy game where you roll dice, and I think very influenced by luck of the player, pretty much. Like, obviously dice throwing is pretty much a factor of luck, right? So, and the goal of the game is to defeat either dice master, so to speak. It's like, think of it like chess, and you play it in a grid, and you have to take out the king or the queen, right? So, but in Dice Master, you have to take the Dice Master out. So, and you do that by using your monsters, right? You spawn monsters and you move them towards the king or the Dice Master and then take them out, right? So, but the catch is that you can only move on your own territory, so to speak. In the game, it's called dungeons. You create your own dungeons, but I'm going to call it territory because that makes a lot more sense. You create territories by using summon tiles. So when you place a tile, it does this neat animation and it unfolds into a tile, and that becomes your territory, right? other monsters come and defeat your monster, then your territory will be deleted and it'll be belonging to their territory and stuff like that, right? So that's pretty much the basic idea of the game. I chose this game because it's pretty simple in logic. So for a first game, I don't want it to be so bloated in possibilities, so to speak, right? I don't want it to be like an open world game where I have to make a lot of things just for the game to be playable. I want it to be fun from the start, from the get-go itself, with limited possibilities, which achievable possibilities, right? So, and this is the testament to that, right? So in 20 days, I think 22 days, I've already come to a dice system, which is a mechanic where you can throw the dice and X number of dice pretty much, and then get the crest or the value of the top facing dice. So, and I've also implemented the dungeon tiles, summon tiles, and territory summoning mechanisms. The big playable content is going to be multiplayer features, which I haven't even thought about implementing. I have no idea how I'm going to implement it. It's probably going to be local PvP because I'm not going to host it anywhere. I did come across a possibility in Unreal Engine where you can use your laptop or your personal PC, right, as a server with your own IP address. So if you share your IP, you can share it to anybody in the world, right? You take your IP and then send it to them, and they can put your IP in their PC, and then you guys can play multiplayer, right? I actually tried that out. I actually made a game for that. It's like a simple Unreal based project, stuff like that, and it worked actually. So I might try to put that, but obviously have to consider performance impacts and stuff like that, which is a lot to consider for first game. So that's the reason I chose this project in the first place. So let me open Unreal Engine really quickly. If you guys think I'm doing a really bad job of explaining what's going on, that's because I haven't scripted for the video. I just took my phone, plugged in my microphone and just started recording and talking about it because I felt I needed to kind of update you guys on what's going on and stuff like that. So I might make a better scripted video next time, but I'm not really getting into that kind of stuff at this point. So let me actually play this game for you guys. So if I hit play, let me make sure if I'm recording. Yeah, okay. So yeah, let me go into full screen. So this is a game, and these two cones here represent the dice master, and your goal is to, as the dice master, you need to go destroy the other dice master. So how do you do that? Well, you go into your dice rolling mode and get dices. So now we got 3 dices with 2 move points and 1 attack point, right? So which is added to the pool here. So this is called the crest pool, so to speak. And what this does is pretty much you can, when you have monsters, right? So you can, if I go back to my dice, we don't have monsters right now, but imagine you had a monster right here. You could click the monster and you can tell it to do certain things, right? Imagine like a Pokemon, right? And let's say you say the monster to attack another monster, you would use up the attack points depending on the attack you're doing, right? So, and if you want that monster to move, you'll use the movement points. If you want to defend against an attack, like I forgot the thing you use in XCOM, like you suppress fire, I guess, right? So you sit in one area and then you just, yeah, I think it's called suppress fire. You might use something like a defense point. And if I go back in, we have now a summon point, a magic point, and a trap point. So it gets added to the crest pool, right? So you could use that in the gameplay of manipulating the monsters itself. Now the summon point is very important because I was reading the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Tiles Wikipedia, and summon points are mandatory for a dice. So at least 1 summon point has to be in a dice. So if you look at the dice right now, we have let me actually close this, right? So F10. Also, I've noticed something strange with Unreal Engine. So if you look at the FPS right here, it kind of stutters and goes all the way to 20 FPS and then resumes at 60 FPS. I don't know what the problem is exactly, but I think, so if I click that and yeah, it kind of stutters very badly. I don't know what it is. If I restart the editor, sometimes it works, but most times it doesn't. So if I come back to my dice blueprint, right? So this is going to my dice blueprint. And if I come to my setup crests function, you can see we have 6 options. So 6 crests, so to speak, for each side of the cube, right? So each face can have its own crest. It doesn't have to be unique, but in the Wikipedia I saw like 6 options, like a trap, magic, movement, defense, and attack. And the way we're doing this is when the dice is spawned, when placed in the world, right? We're not doing it in construction because that will kind of, I think that will limit the randomness or limit the possibilities of the faces. You could actually hard code this. You could assign manually. You could assign each face to each crest and stuff like that, but that doesn't ensure that you'll cover every possibility, right? So I think the possibility range is 6 to the power of 6. It's a pretty big number, right? So you can manually make, let's say for example, maybe 36,000 cubes, right? It's not possible. So that's why I used a random crest generator. And yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. I have a mesh setup here, or a dice setup here with a master collider and then a dice frame, which is a separate mesh, which contains 6 faces, which are again separate meshes. And we come back to setup crests, get all the components that are the faces, and then assign a random crest to that using a data structure, right? So obviously we can't assign the crest information embedded inside the component itself. You could use it, yeah, now I think of it, you could use a child actor here, but you know, that's a little bit more, I think it's more efficient, but this also works, right? So you have a data structure called the dice face data and has a map. It's pretty much a map, pretty much, right? So if I come here to dice face data, it takes in a static mesh as a key, and the value is going to be the face data structure that I created, which contains the static mesh component and the crest enumerator. So this is where you use the crest enumerator and get a random in 04, and then get a random enumeration and store it in the key value of the face component, and then add it to the dice face data map, right? It's called the map, right? Yeah, map. And that's pretty much it. Then we assign materials depending on the enumerator, and we remove that from the random index, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it, how we deal with dices here. Let me try if I can, let me go to begin play and show the thing in action, because I'm not calling the setup crest in the dice itself. I have a different manager class for that, but just for an example, let me try it. And also the input, we have the number of crests, which you can give a random value, because in the game, in the anime, there are levels for dices, so it's 1 to 4, and as I said, a minimum crest number should be there for each dice. So if the dice is level 1, you'll have 4 summon crests. If it is level 2, it's 1 minus, so 3. level 3 you'll have 2, and level 4 you'll have 1, right? So that makes it so that if you pick all high level dices, when you roll them, the chances of you actually summoning something is very less. Maybe I should explain how the summoning works. So what happens is when you, let me come back to my play menu right here, right? Or maybe not, because I don't want to call this when I'm spawning it. So if I come back to my spawner, so now we have one attack, one magic, and one summon. And the summon doesn't go to the crest pool because it's exclusive to one trial. If I play it again, now we have 3 summons, right? So a minimum of 2 summons, and then you can actually place the tile or territory in the world. So if I go back to my game, now I have this sort of territory, so to speak, right? This is going to be my dungeon, and I can actually switch tiles. So these are the possibilities. I think there are 11 possibilities of how a cube can unfold. If you guys love geometry, you guys can go check that out and read a lot on that. But pretty much there are 11 possibilities for the unfolding of a cube without kind of breaking it apart, so to speak, right? So I'm going to choose this one, and I can also rotate it. And if I place it here, we can see the cube unfolding. And now I can't place it anymore because we used those 2 summon tiles to place the summon tile in the world. In the end game, there would be a monster here, right? Depending on the level of the dice, there would be a monster here that would spawn, and you can click on a monster and move it in any of your territory, right, or dungeon tiles. So if I go back and play it again, so now we have only 1 summon tile, so it does nothing. If I play it again, and now we have 2 summon tiles and 1 trap. So now you can see we have that in the world, and I can place it here, and that unfolds neatly. Come back. Again, we have only defense and attack. So if I come here, yeah, I think it's lagging pretty badly. So yeah, this is a game. It's getting quite difficult to get a summon tile. So you can see in a turn-based mechanism, while you lose the opportunity to summon something, your player might be really lucky, or your enemy, and they might have summoned very close to you. So now we have 2 summon tiles. So if I go back to the game, we can summon everything. So let's put the longest here. And if I had a monster here, I could move it all the way through the pink area, which is going to be your dungeon territory. And if I come back, I can try again, obviously. And luckily we got another summon. We can do that, unfold it all the way, and we don't have any summon. And now we have 2 summons. Let's come all the way there. And if I place the tile here, there's going to be no use, right? So I have to place 1 tile close to the, or the tile should be adjacent to the your monster to attack. So if I place it here, if my monster was right there, right next to the dice master, I can pretty much hit the dice master and kill it, right? So that's the entire game. Obviously we don't have any monsters, and obviously you can only do 1 turn per dice, and it'll be turn based pretty much. And we are missing a lot of all these crests. We have no use here. So attack we have not implemented yet, defense not implemented yet, movement not yet, magic, trap. I have some ideas for magic. I might use some card systems, or even for attack, right? I might have card systems that say, hey, this is your move, you can pick a card and then use it and stuff like that. Kind of adding or blending 2 Yu-Gi-Oh mechanics. I think that would be pretty cool to see. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the main functions. So now let me go to my dice and tell you how I'm actually doing the top face pretty much, right? So if I come back here and throw a dice in here, it's a new dice, because this was actually quite difficult. If I simulate it, it falls down, and then okay, we don't have the crests yet, so let me actually do that. Summon crest, I'm actually going to put 4 or 3 and then simulate it. So we have 3 summon crests. So we have 1 attack, so it is reading. And if I come here and I can read through that, so it's summon again, so it doesn't read. Now it should read. So magic. You might have noticed a very slight delay before you actually land and then the crest registering in the pool table, and that is because I'm actually using a very predictable method, I should say, but it comes at the cost of time, which is checking if the rigid body is awake, right? Which means if the rigid body is moving at all, including rotation and movement, right? So momentum and stuff like that. And if it is asleep, so for example, this is moving now and now it's asleep, right? So once it's asleep, that's the only time we actually record the top crest using a line trace. So if I come back here, we're also calling it do once because we are doing a tick method here. We can't obviously go check every frame if line trace is hitting or checking the rotation every frame. That's quite inefficient, I should say. It's not going to burn your PC because we'll obviously delete the dice, and we can also do a branch check if the dice has been checked, and we can stop the tick function. But I think limiting the tick method to the very important stuff, to the essentials, I think is pretty important when you're doing optimization and stuff like that, because depending on the computer, the CPU might not be able to handle 3 ticks at the same time. Now, the computer I'm talking about could be like a 10-year-old laptop and stuff like that. I'm trying to optimize it for literally the entire range of hardware, so keep that in mind. Okay, you don't have to do it, but you can see that, right? So here the tick function only has this much code. In my previous example, if I go to my BP dice, this was my previous iteration, you can see if I come to event graph, we have this whole mess here, this whole mess. Okay, and we also have a for loop in the tick, which is hey, don't look at me, okay? And we have all these noodles going on here, probably opened up a ramen shop, I don't know. And the only thing that was efficient about this method compared to the new method was that we're actually checking the delta rotation. So we're using the previous rotation and comparing to the current rotation and checking if it's equal. And if it is equal, that means the rigid body is not rotating. And if it isn't, then we can instantly get the top face. Whereas compared to this, we have to wait for the momentum to be stabilized and the rotation to be stabilized in order for the rigid body to sleep, right? So keep that in mind, and that's why it's taking a lot of time. You could actually use the delta rotation and position and use that as the condition check for running your top face. It might work, but I felt it was too much code, I should say. And this was a feature I implemented yesterday. So you saw the GitHub commit saying refactored dice. That was this one. And I'm doing a do once and line trace for sides. And this was pretty important. So what we're doing here, I think you might be able to see it if I come really closely. You will see, yeah, you will see a very small sort of line trace for a short period of time. Yeah, there you saw that, right? So what that does is make sure that we are landed on either side of the cube. So you might, since we're using, okay, my cursor is missing, I don't know why. Let me quickly fix that. Cursor settings, style, let me use that. Yeah, now it's working, okay. Unreal Engine is really buggy sometimes, I have no idea why. And it's kind of stuttering a lot today out of no reason. I think my computer is perfectly capable of handling this. So yeah, when you throw the dice, there might be instances where you have something like this, right? So it kind of doesn't touch the floor, it kind of stops in this weird position, something like that. And when that happens, we respawn the dice pretty much, right? So play that again, it stops in this weird position, and then we respawn it in that position. So again, and there you go. And that kind of guarantees that we are always able to get the top face. If it's in this position, when you do a line trace, it's obviously not going to hit the face, it's going to open the, or hit the dice frame. Or if the dice frame collision channel is not, is set to ignore it, so it'll go all the way down to the ground pretty much. So we don't want that. So when we hit play, it's in an awkward situation, it knows what to do, it'll respawn itself. So the way we do that, is check for, if I come to setup, right? Or yeah, maybe line trace, I'm actually doing the line trace. So we get each component face and then get their forward vector and multiply it by certain amounts. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. We just take the normal direction pretty much, right, of each face component or static mesh and then do a line trace. And if it hits something, then obviously that means that dice has been landed on the side. If it hasn't, then this will be returned to false, or it will always return to be false, right? So let me quickly give you a rundown here. So we take this, okay, for this face. You might be tempted to use the up vector, which is the green here, but I tried that. It might work for you if you're using a default static mesh. Like suppose you add a plane here, right? And if I come to local and if I rotate this to be straightforward in 90 degrees, right? So if I bring that out here, you can see this is actually the up vector, right? Or the right vector, sorry, right? So this is going to be this right vector. No, wait, this is the up vector, right? Which is the up vector? Yeah, this is the up vector. Pointing outwards is the up vector, but if I click on my mesh, which has custom pivot points, it's actually going to be the right vector, the red one. So make sure to cross check that in your static mesh or your setup pretty much, right? So let me come back to my event graph, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, we check if this is the top face or landed on side. If it hasn't landed on side, then we call a an event in a blueprint interface, right? So, and that event has been implemented in the roll dice function. This is going to be the dice manager wholly. So if I go there, player actions and roll dice, right? So here we'll have an event calling the add crest to pool, obviously, and also event rethrow wrong dice, and this is included in the blueprint interface which I created. So here, and if you don't know how to add blueprint interface, you can just go to class settings and then implemented interface, add that, and you'll have an event pretty much. And make sure not to have a return node in your blueprint function implementation. If it has an event node, then it'll become a function rather than, or return node, it'll become a function rather than an event. So this one does pretty much what you'd expect. It takes the reference to the current dice that is landed wrongly, which is in an awkward position, and then deletes that from the spawned array, which we do here. So when I hit space, we actually call it here. So we spawn it random position and then add it to the array, which we delete and get the same position, spawn it again there with a random rotator, destroy that actor, and then do all the things again. So set up crest, and then add that. You might be thinking that I could call this in a setup function. I think I could, but I don't want the dice blueprint as a whole to do a lot of things. I want it just to roll around and check the top face and be done with it, right? So all the other deterministic things we'll actually do in a manager class, which is the roll dice, which is actually a child actor in the player actions blueprint. So it's much easier to manage the access points or access levels and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. Before this, I had a very complicated I would call that circular dependencies kind of stuff, but don't think in terms of code it was like noodles all the way around. Like you access this thing, but I access that thing, and it's just I actually want to go in an arrow like a reference tree. I think that would be much better. So that's what I tried here. So I think that's pretty much it, and I'm also running out of time. I'm nearly 32 minutes. Okay, that's a lot of time. So I think we'll stop here for today. Okay, we have, okay, retry. So I think we'll stop there for today. It's just a kind of a brief introduction to what I'm making. I think I've actually showed you the entire game that I worked on up until this point. If you guys are interested in any specific features or how I implemented certain things, do feel free to ask me in the comments below. I will make a dedicated video to that feature. But other than that, the next video is going to be devlog number 1. This is more like an introduction video on what's going on, and yeah, I hopefully think the next video will be a little more scripted. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.